Today I'm making homemade onion rings, and while I'm heating up my lard here, you can use any oil you like. I really prefer lard if you can get it for the health benefits, and coconut oil is also good. And then if you need to, you can just use any neutral oil like grapeseed oil or rice bran oil, anything like that that has a good high smoke point for frying. So while that's heating up, I have here 2 cups of flour. And I'll explain in a minute what kind of flour and how to adjust for different kinds, but first I'm going to season it. I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of salt. And that's really all you have to add, but I also like to add just a little bit of onion powder and garlic powder for extra flavoring. I don't always drop my onion powder on the floor though. That's a new tradition. We'll see if it sticks or not. So I'm going to add about a teaspoon of onion powder here. And then half a teaspoon of garlic powder. And then I'm just going to kind of toss the spices in with a fork and my fingers. You can do whatever seems easiest to you. You can even sift it through a sifter if you'd like. I'm not really a sift things through a sifter kind of cook, but it sounds very lovely. And then, the only other ingredient to the batter is seltzer water, or club soda, as I have here, which is basically seltzer water with a few minerals added for extra flavor. And because I have 2 cups of soft white wheat flour, whole wheat flour, I'm going to need a little less seltzer water than I would if I was using other kinds of flour. The basic ratio is 1 cup of seltzer water to 1 cup of white flour. For the soft white wheat, you use less seltzer water, and if you were using a hard red wheat, you would need more seltzer water. So I'm going to try about 1 1/3 cups of seltzer water, which is 2/3 of a cup per cup of flour. If you were using a hard red wheat, I would suggest starting with 1 1/3 cups per cup of flour. And actually, if you had a hard white wheat, I'm not sure what ratio I would suggest. I would try a little more than the soft white wheat, a little more seltzer water, and then just kind of adjust as needed. Which you really need to do for all kinds of flour anyway. Just even things like changes in the humidity of your kitchen can adjust the texture of the batter. So you really kind of need to mix it up and check the texture and see if it's what you wanted it to be or not. You can see here now that it's all mixed up. It's very bubbly from the seltzer water, and it's softer, it's thinner than a soft dough, but it is definitely very thick for a batter. I may even end up adding just a little bit more seltzer water. We'll see how the onion rings stick first. So the next thing I'm going to do is cut up my onion. I'm just going to cut off both ends here and then peel it. And really, for any kind of speed in peeling an onion, you want to take off the whole first layer of onion and not just sit there trying to peel off little bits of skin for 15 minutes. And then I'm going to slice this into, probably 1/4 inch slices or so. You could go a little thicker than that. That's about a good thickness for an onion ring. It'll cook fast enough to be tender by the time the batter's done. And 1 onion always makes more rings than I think it will. This is 5 slices, and of course every slice is going to come apart into rings here. So once they're all piled up, it looks like quite a lot. And even if you break some of the rings and pulling them apart, you can just make onion strings, and you'll have some onion strings and some onion rings, and they will all taste wonderful. I also fry up these little centers of the onion slices, and then they're onion nuggets. And my oil's about hot here. I've got between 1/2 inch and 3/4 of an inch of hot lard. And I'm just going to throw a few of these onion rings into my batter. And then just kind of push them around with the fork until they're well coated. Yeah, that batter is going to need a little more seltzer water in it. I've added about another 1/4 cup of seltzer water to the batter, and you may not be able to see much of a difference, but it's just a little bit more runny. And the big thing is you can see that it's sticking to the onion ring much better. Before it was just kind of clumping, and now it's nicely coating the onion ring when I put it in the batter. So I'll just drop this in my hot oil. If you're not sure your oil is hot enough, you can drop just a little bit of batter in there, and if it starts bubbling and browns quickly, but without burning quickly, it should be the right temperature. I have my oil set at medium here. And I will admit that frying onion rings that are completely homemade is one of those things that does take a little bit of extra time and effort, and makes a little extra mess in the kitchen. But it is completely worth it, especially if you're trying to get your family hooked on healthy foods. I use the soft white wheat because it doesn't really have that much of a whole wheat flavor. And my husband is always just thrilled when he comes home to homemade onion rings despite the whole wheat. And then I serve them with homemade ketchup, so we're getting our fermented foods in there too. And I like to use tongs for turning the onion rings. You can also just use a spatula of some kind if you prefer. And you want to wait till they're browned, golden browned, and a little bit crispy, but obviously you don't want to let them cook until they're burnt, or even verging on burnt. They can get a little more golden brown than this, but because it's the first batch through, often the oil isn't quite as hot as it's going to be later. So I'm going to go ahead and flip them all. Alright, these have cooked for maybe 1.5 minutes on each side. And as I said, they're not quite as golden brown as the ones later will probably get, but they're definitely cooked through and quite yummy. Here's a messy onion ring, the kind that they don't show you in magazine photos. Also still yummy. And as I take the onion rings off, I like to put them on a plate with a couple paper towels on it to absorb the grease. You can also just use an old clean dish towel or that if you don't, something like that if you don't have paper towels around. This is almost the only thing I use paper towels for anymore. And there's the finished plate of nice crispy homemade onion rings. That's 1 onion and most of the batter that I made. And these are wonderful, enjoyed with either ranch dressing or homemade ketchup.